A solitary German shepherd was discovered adrift many miles from shore atop a plastic cooler, entirely mute, encircled by sharks, yet staunchly remaining. He exhibited no barking, no signs of panic, he was simply waiting. However, the object of his vigil in that remote location was poised to reveal circumstances far more profound than a mere rescue operation, a submerged, secret, and absent individual, and a decision for which no one was equipped. This narrative recounts a tale of allegiance that transcended mortality and a connection that altered destiny. An exceptional quietude exists, familiar only to the vast ocean, not a serene quiet, nor a vacant one. It is a silence that resonates below the waves as if privy to undisclosed knowledge. Kel Whitaker had become accustomed to this specific tranquility. A man of 58 years, previously in the Navy and now a committed recluse, Kel dedicated the majority of his time navigating the turquoise expanse off Key West aboard his fishing boat, a craft distinguished more by its corrosion than its sheen, more by its individuality than its amenities. His life lacked fixed routines or communications, comprising only the elements of water and air. This had been his existence for a prolonged period, foreseeable, peaceful until that particular dawn. The sun was still low in the sky when his attention was drawn to an unusual object in the distance. A small, stationary mass appeared on the water's surface. Kel leaned in for a better view. It was neither a navigational marker nor floating refuse. A slight change in the current afforded him a more distinct sight, and a chill ran through him. Perched atop a drifting plastic cooler, glistening with salt and strewn with something darker, was a German shepherd. Drenched, upright, and mute, the dog made no attempt to swim, emitted no whimper, and did not bark. It simply stood, its gaze fixed on Kel as though it had been anticipating his arrival. Now, such a sight is not an everyday occurrence. A dog that distant from land should have been struggling, terrified, or on the verge of drowning. Yet this particular animal stood like a soldier, composed and alert. The nearer Kel approached, the more dreamlike the scene became. Blood tinged the water, not gushing, merely leaving a trail, and there was the faintest indication of motion beneath the surface. Sharks, certainly more than one, glided below like phantoms armed with teeth. Kel reacted without deliberation, ingrained reflex took over. He cast a line, reduced the engine speed, and leaned precariously over the boat's edge. The cooler bobbed and tilted, yet the dog remained steadfast until the very final moment. And when it did jump, it was not a leap for self-preservation, it was a leap of purpose, the kind one observes only in a creature fully aware of its actions. Kel managed to catch most of its weight and pulled the dripping, heavy animal aboard, panting and sleek, but alive. And that is when the situation grew even more peculiar. Instead of collapsing from relief or curling into a ball as most fatigued animals would, the dog simply stood there, dripping, observing. Its body quivered, not from the chill, but from something else entirely, a palpable tension, a focused state. Then it did something Kel had not witnessed in his many years of rescues or missions. It growled, low and steady, not directed at Kel, but towards the water, towards the vacant expanse of sea behind them. It did not require much for Kel to perceive it. The dog repeatedly glanced backward, again and again, to the same location, an unremarkable patch of ocean, yet somehow significant. Something was present out there, something the dog was reluctant to abandon. Kel altered the boat's course slightly as a test. The dog stepped forward. Another adjustment of direction, another step from the dog. Kel ceased his maneuvers. He sat back, observing the animal that now stood like a sentry at the prow of his own vessel. This was no longer just a rescue, it was not merely a dog. Not any longer. This creature possessed a clear objective, a sense of direction, as if it had selected him to complete a task it had initiated. And Kel, a man who had not followed another's guidance in years, found himself reaching for the throttle, gazing into the water, and murmuring, "All right, boy. Show me." What sort of dog drifts through shark-infested waters only to refuse to depart? They were on the verge of discovering the answer. The instant the throttle was eased, the wind appeared to subside, and Kel could finally draw a proper breath. He threw an old piece of tarpaulin across the deck and gently encouraged the dog to sit. "Easy now," he mumbled, more to reassure himself than the animal. But the dog neither sat nor flinched, it just stood like a sculpture, its eyes unwavering from that same area of sea behind them. That silent, intense pressure Kel had sensed earlier had not dissipated. If anything, it was intensifying, the kind of weight that makes one's intuition challenge what is real. Kel fetched a bucket, filled it with fresh water, and slid it across the deck. The dog did not so much as blink. He opened a can of sardines and placed a piece near the tarpaulin. Not even a sniff. This was not indicative of fear, nor was it shock. It was something far more enigmatic. This dog was not seeking refuge, it was awaiting something else, something still out in the ocean. Kel stepped outside and activated the radio. Coast Guard, Coast Guard. This is Vessel Delilah reporting an unusual rescue. He stated his name, provided approximate coordinates, paused, and then found himself hesitating. A tightness constricted his chest. The dog had edged closer to the bow, once again staring intently at the water. Kel's fingers hovered above the microphone. He did not complete the transmission. Instead, he terminated the signal because a deep intuition informed him that this was not merely a rescue. This was a thread, and once one begins to pull at a thread, one must be prepared for what comes undone. Back inside, the dog had commenced pacing, not rapidly but in deliberate circles near the stern. Its nose twitched, its body was taut, and its tail remained still. With every circuit, it paused, scanned the horizon, and then retraced its exact path. It was as if the dog were reenacting an event, following unseen footfalls, a ritual, a memory. Kel did not understand it, but the sight sent shivers down his spine, and he was a man who had experienced war. The sun began to descend lower in the sky, casting a golden hue across the deck. Kel decided to drop anchor and rest for the night, convinced the dog would eventually succumb to exhaustion. He tossed down a warm towel and a small blanket, gave the animal its space, and opened a beer, feigning indifference to the unease that pricked at his senses. Yet, hours elapsed and the dog never lay down. Instead, it remained perched, its back straight, gazing out into the darkening waters like a beacon without a light. And as the initial stars began to glitter above the horizon, Kel started to notice something else, a sound. It began faintly, a soft splash, too uniform for a wave. Then another, followed by something more distinct, like metal striking metal, slow, reverberating, and unsettlingly deliberate. Kel put his beer aside. The sound was not originating from his boat, it was coming from the water. He moved towards the bow. The dog did not turn, did not even so much as blink. Kel scanned the black expanse. Nothing. Just waves, wind, and a profound feeling in the pit of his stomach relaying, "You are not alone out here." And then he perceived it, a flicker just beneath the surface, like a glint of steel captured in the moonlight, vanishing as swiftly as it had appeared. It was not a fish nor a buoy, it was something man-made. Then it was gone. Kel retreated slowly. His hand made contact with the dog's fur, wet, coarse, and trembling, but not with fear. The dog was not frightened, it was bracing itself. And abruptly, Kel comprehended. This dog had not drifted into his life by chance. It was not lost. It had guided Kel to this location, and whatever lay beneath them had not yet revealed itself. Not all things merely drift at sea. Some actively seek. And this particular one, this one had eyes. The sunrise failed to bring tranquility, instead it brought inquiries. Kel stood at the helm, holding a half-empty mug of coffee. His eyes having not closed for a single moment. The dog had not slept either, not genuinely. It had maintained its vigil throughout the night, scarcely moving, its muscles coiled taut like springs laden with memory. Whatever this animal had witnessed, whatever knowledge it possessed, it bore the burden of it like a soldier unwilling to abandon a fallen comrade. Kel was reluctant to concede it, but something had shifted within him as well. This was no longer solely about fishing or even about rescuing a stray. This was beginning to feel like a thread pulled from a garment that was never intended to unravel. He steered the boat slightly towards the shore. Perhaps they would return, let someone else resolve the mystery. But the instant he adjusted the wheel, the dog lunged forward with astonishing force, positioning itself at the bow and emitting a low, deliberate growl. It was not an expression of rage, it was one of refusal. Kel stopped, stared. "All right," he muttered. "We proceed your way." Adhering to the dog's silent direction, Kel allowed the vessel to drift eastward. The sea was calm, excessively so, as if it knew what was impending and chose not to forewarn them. An hour passed, then two. Then, just as Kel began to wonder if they were pursuing a phantom, he saw it. Floating just ahead, ensnared in seaweed and a tattered net, was a life vest, crushed, faded by the sun, and torn at the seams. He reduced the engine's speed and carefully retrieved it, noting stains that were too crimson to overlook. Then he observed it, something hand-stitched inside the collar, a message. Jagged, hurried lettering sewn into the lining of the vest, like a person's final thought made tangible. "If anyone finds this, tell my brother I stayed." Kel's fingers clenched. The vest fell to the deck with a soft thud. The dog whimpered, then for the first time moved with discernible emotion, not tension, not alertness, but sorrow. It stepped forward, sniffed the vest, and slowly lay down, not collapsing, not curling up, but with a sense of reverence. Its head lowered onto the blood-stained material as if it were hallowed, as if it were the last remnant of someone it refused to relinquish from memory. Kel's breath caught in his throat. This was no mere coincidence, this was not a lost animal. This was an exhibition of love, purpose, and loyalty that surpassed all logical explanation. But then something even more unsettling came into view, a faint trail, red, diluted by the ocean, yet undeniably present, leading eastward. Kel followed it with his eyes, his stomach tightening with each passing second. It was not a random trace, it was a drag mark as if something or someone had been pulled. And the dog knew. Its eyes did not leave the horizon now, its body tense once more, a silent directive in its posture that conveyed to Kel this was merely the inception. He did not radio the Coast Guard. He did not summon assistance. Instead, he reset his course and pressed onward. Something was out there, something the dog had risked everything to safeguard. And now Kel was entwined in it. Because some rescues commence with a dog and some commence with what that dog steadfastly refuses to leave behind. There are instances at sea when the wind pauses for a fraction of a second too long and the air presses against your skin as if attempting to impart a secret it doesn't want the waves to overhear. That was the sensation now. As Kel advanced along the blood-faded trail, the ocean did not crash or churn, it waited. Even the sky appeared perplexed, clouding over, yet holding its breath, the kind of calm that experienced sailors know not to trust. He adjusted his course eastward. The dog stood tall beside him, observing every mile as if it already knew what they would discover. Then the boat creaked, not from the impact of waves, but from something denser in the atmosphere. Ahead, barely discernible until they were almost upon it, loomed a half-skinned shrimping barge, rusted, decayed, the sort of maritime derelict that would be recorded as scrapped in some Coast Guard database, yet it remained there, forgotten. Like a secret the water had never quite managed to engulf. The dog growled before Kel even noticed the nameplate on its side, not loudly, not aggressively, but a deep, instinctual reaction. Kel's intuition responded in kind. He docked slowly and quietly, one hand on the throttle, the other on a flashlight he had not employed in years. As he stepped onto the corroded metal deck, he anticipated the dog would follow. Instead, the German Shepherd froze, one paw raised, body tensed, its gaze fixed on the lowest level of the barge. Whatever was below, it was the reason for their journey. The deck groaned beneath Kel's boots. Oil slicks pulled near the rear, and a potent stench assailed him swiftly, a mixture of rust, decomposing fish, and something chemical. He moved with caution, surveying the narrow interior. It was empty, yet not entirely abandoned. Kel's eyes detected signs of human presence, cans of beans, new, a half-folded sleeping mat, flattened as if it had not been rolled up in days, a rusted kettle with damp ashes beneath it. Someone had been here recently, perhaps was still present. Then he saw the wall, words scratched deeply into the metal, messy and frantic as if carved in a state of panic. Trust the dog. He backed away slowly. No footsteps, no reverberations, just that silence again, more resonant than anything else. He opened a duffel bag, tossed near a corner, and inside discovered a photograph, creased, water-damaged, but intact. The dog was in it, younger, leaner, wearing a harness. Beside him stood two men in uniform, one tall, one stockier. One wore a navy patch Kel recognized instantly. The other's face had been partially obscured by water damage, but his posture conveyed enough. These were not merely companions, they were brothers in arms. Kel stared at the photograph, then at the dog, which was still outside, unmoving but now trembling, almost imperceptibly, as if containing something within that could not remain suppressed much longer. Then came the sound from below deck. A clang, metallic, not from the ocean, but from inside the barge, slow, measured, like someone dragging metal across steel. Kel moved towards the noise, his breath shallow, every muscle recalling years of Navy training he thought he had long since forgotten. The dog did not bark, did not move, but its gaze never wavered from the lower deck. Something was down there, something that had kept this dog alive long enough to swim through shark-infested waters, something that made him guard a floating cooler as if it were sacred. And whatever it was not yet concluded. Kel had not intended to engage in detective work at sea. But standing above a rusted hatch on the lower deck of a half-skinned shrimping barge, holding a flashlight with trembling fingers, he understood that plans were irrelevant. The dog remained at the entrance, motionless, its head low. But its eyes, those eyes were locked on that hatch as if it concealed more than just metal beneath it, as if it were holding breath, memory, something sacred. The clang from below had ceased. Silence returned, but it offered no relief, it was worse, pulsating with pressure. Kel crouched, lifted the hatch slowly, its hinges screeching in protest, and was met by a wave of stench so foul it made his throat constrict. Diesel, salt, sweat, and something else, survival. The space beneath was barely high enough for a man to kneel in. But someone was there. A hand moved first, then the faint outline of a body. Kel dropped to his knees, reaching quickly, pulling the figure upward with every ounce of strength he possessed. The body was drenched, sunburnt, eyes hollowed from dehydration, but alive barely. The man choked on his own breath, lips crusted, face ghostly pale. He blinked once, then turned his gaze upward and froze. His stare was not on Kel, it was on the dog behind him. "Did you follow the dog?" the man rasped, his voice barely a whisper, as if his vocal cords had desiccated with the tide. Kel did not reply, he did not know how. He just stared at him, this human specter, clinging to consciousness as if it might still slip away. The dog stepped closer now, cautiously, as if confirming something. And then the man smiled faintly, weakly, but genuinely. Kel hoisted him fully into the open cabin, sat him against a wall, and handed him water. The man drank slowly, as if each sip were a deliberate decision. Then he reached out, not for Kel, but for the dog. His hand shook uncontrollably as it found the dog's neck. The dog did not move, did not pull away, just closed its eyes and leaned in. Kel stood over them, his mind racing. He finally broke the moment. "Who are you?" The man exhaled. "Micah Denton. Diver. Private marine contractor. I wasn't supposed to make it out." He pointed towards the deck above. "They came after us." "Weren't supposed to. My partner." He did not finish. Kel asked what had transpired. Micah shook his head slowly. "Boat hit. Radio gone. I was stuck. Only one chance, send the dog. Float him out. If anyone followed him, it meant someone good was still out there." Kel looked at the dog, now sitting beside Micah like a soldier reunited with his unit. "Why didn't you just swim yourself?" Micah smiled again, this time with bitterness. "Because I knew they were watching the surface. But not for him." Micah suddenly became alert. "Did you? Did you find the case?" Kel hesitated. Micah nodded towards a corner of the room. Kel followed his gaze to a small locker, dented, chained, and sealed tight. Inside was a waterproof case. He opened it slowly. Documents, a sealed journal, a flash drive, and a military dog tag. The name on the tag was not Micah's. Kel held it up. "Who is this?" Micah looked away. "My brother." The dog lay down now, rested its head on Micah's boot, and let out a long, quiet breath. This was not a story about being rescued. It was about someone who had never ceased trying to complete what someone else had initiated. And the only thing standing between them and the truth was a dog that never surrendered. Rain was encroaching from the southern sky, thick clouds swelling like contusions, poised to erupt. Kel knew the sea was transforming. The barometer on his dashboard had plunged dangerously low, but he did not move. Not yet. He sat opposite Micah, still trying to process the man's account. His words felt like loose leaves from a volume someone had attempted to incinerate. Only a fragment of the truth had endured. Micah took another slow sip of water, his hands trembling from more than just the cold. "The dog?" "His name's Denton," he stated hoarsely, barely raising his eyes. "Same as my brother. I named him after him the day he came home from deployment. Thought maybe it'd keep a piece of him around." Kel turned to the dog. Denton, if that was indeed his name, sat unmoving, observing Micah with a loyalty so absolute it caused Kel's chest to tighten. There was something unsettling about it. This was not merely a companion, this was a dog that had witnessed something it could not articulate but also could not forget. Micah leaned back, his voice raw but gaining stability. "We were hired by a private contractor, funded covertly. Deep salvage operations off the coast. What we discovered wasn't just scrap. It was military." He glanced at the case. "My brother's journal. The USB drive inside it, it's not stories. It's evidence." Kel narrowed his eyes. "Evidence of what?" Micah stared at him, his expression crumbling under the gravity of what he was about to reveal. "A mission that never reached the press. A Navy dive unit found something offshore 2 years ago. Classified wreckage. Top brass concealed it. But my brother was on that recovery team. He documented everything, names, coordinates, photographs. When they realized he hadn't erased the evidence, he was reassigned to an accidental recon op. He didn't make it back." Micah gestured towards the dog again. "The only one who did was Denton." Kel ran a hand down his face. Everything was shifting beneath him like the tide. What had begun as a quiet fishing trip had escalated into something colossal. "You said someone came after you." "Who?" Micah's voice dropped. "The same ones who sent us out there. People who don't want that wreckage discussed. I was followed, watched. They waited for us to find it again, then tried to eliminate us." The air grew heavier. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Low and weary, Micah sat upright, his eyes wide. "We need to move." Kel blinked. "What?" "They'll come for that case. They always do." As if on cue, Denton barked once, sharp, urgent, a sound that sliced through the fog like a flare. Kel bolted upright. Through the cabin's cracked window, he spotted something on the horizon. Small, fast, dark, a boat, no lights, no flag, just a silent shape cutting through the storm's edge, heading straight towards them. Kel grabbed the case, slamming it shut. We don't have time to wait for the Coast Guard. Micah struggled to his feet. Get to the engine. I'll cover the rear. Denton did not wait for commands. He ran ahead, positioning himself on the bow as he had earlier that morning, as if he knew this was not just about survival, it was the final phase of something much larger. And no one aboard the broken vessel could afford to lose now, not with everything they had left clinging to a dog that refused to let the truth perish in silence. The rain did not await an invitation, it fell in torrents, crashing down as if the ocean sky had finally exhausted its patience. Lightning rent the sky in the distance, closer than before, and the sea turned tumultuous beneath the barge, hurling waves like blows against its rusted hull. But no one on board moved to seek shelter, not Kel, not Micah, and not Denton, the dog, who had once again taken position at the vessel's front. Ears erect, soaked fur matted against muscle, his body remained unmoving as if anchoring the boat by sheer force of will alone. Micah, clutching the sealed case to his chest like a lifeline, shouted above the storm, "They're close. If they find us before the Coast Guard does, it's over. You understand that, right?" Kel did not respond. He was observing the approaching boat, black hull, unmarked, slicing through waves with surgical quietness. No distress signal, no radio communication, just that sensation again, that dreadful certainty. Whoever was inside that vessel was not there for inquiries, they were there to obliterate. "Get below," Kel barked, gripping the wheel tighter. "And keep the dog close." But Denton did not stir, not a twitch. He remained at the bow like a specter maintaining a vigil, his eyes locked on the shadow in the storm ahead, a shadow that now began to turn, rapidly. "They're circling," Micah yelled. "They've seen us." What transpired next unfolded in seconds that stretched like a wire about to snap. A flash, then a crack, not thunder, but gunfire. One shot, then another. The second splintered through the top of the mast, showering down fragments of wood and steel. Kel slammed the throttle. The barge groaned, slow to respond, its age no match for the predator closing in. Denton suddenly leaped down from the bow, barking with an intensity Kel had not heard before, not fear, but fury. He sprinted across the slick deck, weaving between crates and coiled rope like a creature reborn. And then, without hesitation, he vaulted off the edge of the barge, straight into the storm. "Denton!" Micah's scream was guttural, broken. The splash was engulfed by the rain. Kel moved to the edge, scanning frantically, but the sea was chaos, waves heaving like breathing monsters. The other boat hesitated, slowed for just a moment, its spotlight swinging erratically through the tempest. A new sound pierced the air, a flare igniting, red, bright, launched from somewhere near the rear of the barge. Not by Kel, not by Micah, but by Denton. The flare had been secured to his harness. It soared into the sky, arcing above both vessels like a blood-red comet before exploding in a ball of fire and light. It was loud, blinding, impossible to miss. And it worked. The approaching boat turned, spun wide. Whoever was inside was not prepared to be seen, the light had exposed them. Denton had drawn their aim and saved them both. Micah was already leaning over the rail, eyes wild, calling into the wind, "Come back. Come on, boy. Denton, come back." There was no reply. Just rain, water, and silence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The Coast Guard boat arrived like thunder in its own right, floodlights washing over the deck, orders shouted, ropes tossed. But Kel did not move. Micah did not move. They just stood there, two men staring out into the sea as if it had stolen something sacred. And then, a scrape, soft, metallic, from the side of the barge. Kel spun first, dropped to his knees. Pole reached up, then another. Denton, covered in cuts, bleeding from one ear, eyes fogged but still sharp, dragged himself up onto the barge, collapsing into Kel's arms without a sound. Not a cry, not a whimper, just presence. Micah sank beside them, hand to the dog's chest, feeling it rise and fall. Slow, weak, but alive. They did not speak. They did not need to, because everyone aboard that barge knew exactly what had just occurred. That dog did not return for rescue. He returned to complete the mission. The morning after felt surreal. The sea had calmed, its fury expended. The air was soft again, thick with salt and something more. A stillness that did not feel empty, but full of the unspoken weight left behind by a night that had nearly consumed them. The Coast Guard had taken statements, examined the case, and called in reinforcements. But Kel noticed it. The way the officers looked at the files, the journal, the flash drive, with that same quiet hesitance, as if they knew that engaging with the story meant being altered by it. Micah had been silent since Denton climbed back aboard. He sat beside him now, one hand resting gently on the dog's neck, his thumb brushing through its damp fur. Denton did not move much, just leaned into Micah's knee, tail still, breath steady but shallow. He had given everything, every last ounce of instinct, drive, and devotion. Not for survival, but for truth. Kell watched them for a long time before pulling the Coast Guard commander aside. "What happens now?" he asked. The officer sighed. "That journal, it'll go through the system. But I'll be honest with you, sir. Things like this, they get buried more often than they get believed. Even with a witness." The officer looked at Denton. "Even with a hero." There it was, the thing no one wanted to articulate. Micah had survived. Kell had helped. But Denton had proven what loyalty looked like when it was not convenient, when it hurt, when it nearly cost you everything. They left the barge by noon. Denton rested beside Micah for the entire journey back. No barking, no whimpering, just quiet trust, as if he had passed some invisible torch and knew his part of the mission was concluded. 2 days later, back in Key West, Micah checked himself into a VA recovery facility. He handed over the documents officially. They offered him silence in return. He did not protest. He had already lost too much to the noise. Kell visited every day, but it was not Micah he primarily came to see. It was Denton. The first few times, the dog barely lifted his head. But by the 5th visit, when Kell walked through the gate, Denton rose slowly, limping but determined. He pressed his body against Kell's leg. No sound, no begging, just choice. Micah stepped out from the porch. "He's not waiting for me anymore," he said softly. "He's already chosen." Kell hesitated. "You sure?" Micah nodded. "I lost my brother, but I didn't lose the story. And Denton? He gave me back more than I deserve." There were no dramatic speeches, no cinematic farewells, just one man walking home beside a dog who had been to the brink of death and chosen to return. Not for rescue, but for meaning. Weeks passed. Denton healed. He took up the space beside Kell's cot on the boat as if he had always belonged there. Kell still fished, still floated out into the blue, but he was not alone anymore. And every so often, they would drift past the place where it all began, the cooler, the fins, the silence. And Denton would look out towards the horizon, eyes searching for something only he understood. Kell would watch him, and sometimes, without intending to, he would whisper, "I get it, because some stories are not told. They are guarded. And some dogs, they do not just survive the sea. They carry what the sea tried to drown."